Catholic and pro-abortion. Joe Biden is Catholic, Nancy Pelosi is Catholic, Lisa Murkowski is Catholic, and the list goes on and on. But on key issues of leadership, the Catholic faith of these politicians, they always seem to kind of disappear. So when it comes to abortion, countless so-called Catholic politicians in Washington, they seem to be voting for the most anti-Catholic positions that are possible that you could even dream up. Infanticide? Sure. Research on human embryos? Love it. Taxpayer fund it. Abortion on demand for any reason, paid for with taxpayer funds, even unwilling taxpayers? Couldn't be happier about it. So today on Explicitly Pro-Life, Brian Burch is here representing his organization, Catholic Vote, who's going to help me break down this wild phenomenon for us. We're also going to chat about some current events, and I get to pick his brain a little bit for 2024. So stay tuned. Thanks for tuning in to Explicitly Pro-Life today.
Abortions may be regulated, but not prohibited by state law.
There is no constitutional right to an abortion in this country anymore as of today.
So my guest today at Explicitly Pro-Life is Brian Burch, president and co-founder of CatholicVote.org, a national faith-based advocacy organization headquartered in Madison, Wisconsin. Catholic Vote was founded to organize, inspire, and mobilize the Catholic vote through education, legislative advocacy, and direct political action. Brian is also the co-author of the American Catholic Almanac, a daily reader of notable saints, sinners, heroes, and rogues that have shaped American public life. CatholicVote.org has received national attention for its online viral videos, including multiple ads that have logged over 2 million online views each. Their online campaigns have garnered grassroots interest among people of all faith, helping to grow the organization to over 500,000 members in the last 4 years. It's a lay organization inspired by St. John Paul II's call for a new evangelization, and it does such amazing work throughout the country. Brian is a dad and a wife. He's a dad of 9 and lives outside of Chicago, the suburbs, with his wife, Sarah, and 9 children. Thanks, Brian, for coming on today.
Thanks. Glad to be here. Very honored.
Well, it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to have to keep ourselves in check because I think we could talk forever about this topic of Catholic and pro-abortion political leaders. It's so infuriating. I personally find it very infuriating as a Catholic convert who, still has a lot of people she wants to bring home to the Catholic Church to have, the second Catholic president that America's ever had get up and just basically, speak heresy when it comes to abortion. It's just absolutely outrageous. And there's so much news out there I think we can dig into. Recently, President Biden actually came out and used his Catholic faith to justify why he would veto any bill that would be passed in Congress that would prevent abortions at 4 months when children can feel pain. What were the thoughts going through your head when you heard that news story?
Well, you can imagine it's kind of maddening. It's outrageous. I mean, you better be careful, Kristan, because Joe Biden famously said that the next person that asks him about his faith, he's going to jam his rosary beads down their throat. So you might want to add some extra locks on your door to the studio there. But no, I mean, it's for anyone that's listening that's Catholic, and even if you're not Catholic, it's absolutely scandalous. It's hypocritical. You can call it truth in advertising. It's the most basic, decent, element of integrity is that when you claim to belong to a religious institution as old and as obviously well known as the Catholic Church, you ought to at least abide by its core foundational teachings. And of course, Joe Biden and so many others, you cited some of them, Nancy Pelosi, they've put politics over their faith. They are too enamored by the honor and prestige and the lure of this world, frankly. And they use their faith and manipulate Catholic voters. They do it time and again. Joe Biden has called himself a devout Catholic repeatedly. He did so in mid-September when he said, scandalously, that the church no longer even teaches against abortion in some cases. Well, that's just a flat out lie, and the media lets him get away with it. And Catholics are angry. They're frustrated. They want to see better leadership from their church, and they want to see things from lay people, from lay groups like yours and mine, that they want to see action. They want to do something about this so that we can end this confusion and this scandal that is plaguing our church right now.
I find it interesting because for so long, the mantra that even before I was even Catholic would be shouted at me at events was, keep your rosaries off my ovaries. And that was like the whole thing of like, you religious right-wing nut jobs, quit bringing up religion to justify your extremist beliefs. So I mean, I think that was shouted at me like hundreds and thousands of times before. But now I'm seeing this phenomenon of these pro-abortion politicians trying to use their faith to justify their votes and their scandal that they're bringing upon themselves and their religion.
You're right. I mean, this is a really kind of the subtle subtext of what's going on. They have given up on saying that there is religion over here and this belief over here that are in conflict, and that we need to keep religion at bay. What they've now decided to do is to co-opt religion altogether, and to say, well, if the Catholic Church or the Christian belief holds that all life is sacred, well, we're just going to change that belief, and we're going to co-opt Christianity itself and co-opt the Catholic Church and claim that we are now the arbiters of what that religious tradition teaches. It's even worse than it was before. And this is part of the problem, is that unfortunately a lot of voters and a lot of even Catholics misunderstand what the church teaches, or they've actually adopted the lie that somehow these sorts of assaults on the innocent children in mothers' wombs is now a belief that Catholics can hold, and that there's all sorts of ways they try to justify this, kind of dilute the issue among other issues and say somehow pollution and climate change is the same thing, or that we need to address the problems that lead women to abortion. We don't need to outlaw abortion itself. We hear all of these kind of distractions, and this is in some ways why my organization was started. It's not just a political question. It's really a question about the integrity of Catholic teaching itself. And it's both a political question and in many ways an ecclesial question that's at stake in this November election.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my question is, how did we get to this point? I mean, obviously we know the left likes to redefine terms. I mean, all the diagnoses are there that our economy is in recession, and the Biden administration just says, nope, it's not recession. We've redefined the terms. We've redefined the terms of what is a woman and what is a mother. And so the left loves to just do this time and time again. But I'm just thinking back to like last summer when there was the whole meeting that the bishops were having about canon law and about Holy Communion and about these leaders who espouse to be Catholic, faithful Catholics, who present themselves for the Eucharist, for the actual body and blood of Jesus Christ when they are in Mass, and yet are sinning and committing a sin in espousing their support and voting for abortion. I know there was a whole discussion. There was a big media hubbub. We did some events, but nothing really came of it. Do you think this is a problem within the Catholic Church of not speaking out loud enough to make sure we're informing these political leaders of the grave consequences on their own salvation for what they're doing?
Well, unquestionably, the church does not teach. It certainly teaches authoritatively, but it doesn't preach it enough, and doesn't preach it, as you described, maybe loudly or clearly enough, or enough to begin with. you asked the question, where did this come from? It didn't just happen, last June at this bishops meeting where they, tried to address the challenge of pro-abortion politicians and the need to, as they described it, Eucharistic coherence. It goes back to decades. It goes back to Mario Cuomo at Notre Dame. It goes back to the Kennedys. It goes back to the time of Roe v. Wade, when the decision was made and one political party in this country, unfortunately, decided that they were going to be the party of abortion. And that party at that time, and still in many ways, is the home of many Catholics. And so they had to try to figure out a way to reconcile this movement for radical feminism, which became defined by the right to kill one's child, how they can reconcile that inside the Democratic Party. And you've had, this is decades in the making. And so what we're seeing now with President Biden, he's really a product of that time. He's a product of that generation that, in many ways, you go back, Joe Biden used to at least publicly espouse a largely pro-life position, and he's moved gradually to the left up to the point where, if you recall, when he ran for president, he tried to say that he was still opposed to taxpayer funding of abortion and defended the Hyde Amendment. And that lasted about 24 hours until he realized, wait a minute, I'm running for the nomination inside the Democratic Party that permits zero restrictions on abortion. And so he quickly caved, and now he's moved even harder to the left, where he essentially supports no restrictions whatsoever. And if you want to survive inside the party, unfortunately, that's the position you have to take, even if you are a Catholic. Ask Dan Lipinski, a Catholic from Chicago, one of the last real pro-life Democrats. His position was intolerable, and his own party got together and pushed him out.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can really make the argument, especially with Dan Lipinski, who, was one of the three, I think, Democratic House Representatives members who voted against Obamacare, who was punished for that, stripped of committee assignments. They ran, to the left of him in the primaries, his own party. He fended them off a couple of times. The final time he lost. But I think it's really interesting to see the progression of the Democratic Party on this. I remember years and years ago reading a book from Kristan Day from Democrats for Life, and her kind of premise was the Democratic Party was founded to be this party of the poor, of the weak, the most vulnerable, and so many of its leaders at one time were pro-life. And in fact, when Roe was handed down, it was many of the Republicans who were pro-abortion. Nixon said some really not great things about certain children, and I would say held, what could be known as, eugenic beliefs. And so, but yet something switched, like something changed there.
Yeah. Well, and of course, Ronald Reagan was pro-abortion as the governor of California, and he famously had a conversion and ended up becoming one of the more prominent pro-life Republicans, national leaders that, of course, led to subsequent presidents and Republican candidates having to assent to that position. But it's super interesting in ways the parties are now flipping, because you're right, the Democratic Party traditionally was this party of the working class, of unions, of immigrants. And you can see interesting what's happening. You're starting to see it this election cycle in a major way. And I think Trump was a part of this. The working class voter, the rural voter, even Hispanic legal immigrants now are moving in the direction of the Republican Party. And I think the Republican Party has a real opportunity, if they embrace it, to become this party of real people, of families, of workers, of the unborn, what the Catholics would call this principle of solidarity, that we are our brother's keeper, and we have to prioritize the needs and the priorities of our economy and our culture and our community, our nation. And the Democratic Party, unfortunately, has moved more toward that Nixonian country club Republican Party. They're now the party of big business, of big tech, of big government, of big control over the people. And, I think both parties are now carving out kind of this new pathway to try to, control the electorate. And I think this is going to play out in this midterm election in a big way.
Absolutely. Are you concerned? You brought up midterm, so good segue there, Brian. Are you concerned about, I've been concerned about, kind of some of these pro-life Republican politicians who've always said they're pro-life, proudly pro-life, come to the dinners, kind of backpedaling on their stances on abortion. Does that concern you? Do you think it's more just, they're getting bad advice from their consultants, and then after November, they'll kind of, quickly re-add those lines back to their websites? Or is this something you think we're going to be called to really speak into and to really reach into some of these political leaders and have these hard conversations with them about reminding them of these pro-life principles and why they've stood so courageously for life all of these years?
Yeah, no, you're right. We definitely going to have a battle on our hands, and we can criticize the Democratic Party's transition, but let's not pretend the Republican Party has been perfect or is still perfect. They often pay lip service to our issue. They need us as voters. We're not for pro-life voters. They would never win a single election. We can't forget about they need us more than we need them. And so you're right. If Republicans do happen to take over Congress or the Senate, then we're going to have to hold their feet to the fire. This wasn't just an election gimmick that we used to run when we had Roe v. Wade in order to turn out votes. We're actually really serious about protecting life and protecting life in law. Imagine that. And so you're right. I think part of the debate's going to come over this question of, is there still a federal role when it comes to abortion? And when we got rid of Roe v. Wade with the Dobbs decision, a lot of people, and I think a lot of, unfortunately, Republican leaders are hiding behind this now talking point that it's now best resolved at the states. Yeah, that's what Dobbs did. It gave the right of states to regulate abortion, but that didn't say, Dobbs never said, there's nothing in the Dobbs decision that said there is no federal role constitutionally when it comes to abortion. It didn't address that question at all. So nothing changed as far as the federal government with Dobbs. It just allowed states to do things that they were prevented from doing before. And so, yeah, there's going to be a debate. Is there a federal role? Yes. If there is a federal role, what kinds of legislation can we get passed? What types of bills should we introduce? And these debates are occurring in the pro-life movement. And we say that, as much as possible, we need to keep the pressure on and to think strategically about how to move the party in that direction. We are not going to rest. This is not 12-week, 15-week heartbeat. It doesn't matter. We know the goal. You've been so good on saying this goal is achievable, and we are going to achieve it in this generation.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think we're going to have to hold our friends' feet to the fire. And I think what you said, there's going to be a lot of hallelujahs to what you're saying about, the Republicans. Sometimes we know of Republicans who are just doing lip service to get votes. And now is the time where we're going to have to hold them accountable. And so this isn't just a Democrat problem. This is also a Republican problem. And I know the majority of our independent listeners will be very happy to hear us affirm that, because I think sometimes folks, especially younger people in the pro-life movement, get kind of frustrated because they feel like the pro-life, we try to make pro-life synonymous with Republican. And that's not what we're about. We're about saving human lives, making abortion unthinkable and unavailable, and working with those in power the best and the most strategic way that we can to get us to that point. And there's a lot of different policy prescriptions and places where we can start. Do we start here? Do we start there? But ultimately, we're all in agreement on our goal. And our job isn't to be friends. It's to be those pushers and to be those kind of annoying people that are never satisfied. I had somebody say that to one of our student leaders the other day. We were at an event and they were like, "Oh yeah, you work with that Kristan Hawkins. She's never satisfied." And I was like, I want to go find this person and kiss them. They're exactly right. I am never satisfied.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I like to say, remember in 2015 when the Obergefell decision was announced? This was the famous Supreme Court decision that legalized same-sex marriage. What did Republicans do? What did Democrats do? They moved the ball immediately. When they got the Dobbs decision, the Democrats introduced the Women's Health Protection Act, the most radical bill ever introduced, and they're literally 2 votes away in the Senate from actually getting this thing through. This would be 10 times worse than Roe v. Wade. We got our Supreme Court decision, and what would we do? We want to go sit on our hands. It's the exact opposite. And people have to understand it's not just a political strategic question. The law teaches, the word is the pedagogical role of law. So much of our public doesn't invest themselves in these issues in the way that say you and I, or a lot of the people that are probably listening do. What they do is they think, is it legal? Then it's right. If it's illegal, it's wrong. And when you pass laws, you send a message to the public to say, this is something we no longer consider good, just, right, normal, moral. And so it's pushing these kinds of laws send a message to the culture, and the culture has to come along. We can't just say we need to wait for the culture in order to get these laws passed.
That's exactly right. I think that's such sage advice for all of us as we're having these policy discussions and really trying to figure out where do we go in our state or where we go federally, where do we start? I guess going back to the bad news about Catholics in the public square, what are the good things? What are some, who are some amazing Catholic political leaders that I know Catholic Vote does a really good job of like highlighting winners and losers. I love it. But who are some of the winners that we should be really looking to who are Catholic, pro-life, politically engaged?
Well, I mean, of course, the top of the list right now is Ron DeSantis in Florida. Maybe people don't know he's a Catholic and he's a proud Catholic. He's proudly pro-life. I mean, there's some, arguments over whether he's adequately pushed some of things we want in Florida. But of course, there's other governors. Governor Ducey in Arizona, he just passed the most aggressive pro education choice law ever in the history of the United States. If you're a family in Arizona, you get $7,500 per child to go to any school you want, including Catholic schools, any kid, including homeschooling, by the way. So we're all moving to Arizona. We're all moving to Arizona soon. Happens to be my home state, so I'm a little biased, but yeah. Then, of course, at a federal level, I mean, there's many different Catholic leaders, from Chris Smith to Steve Scalise. I mean, the list goes on in terms of pro-life.
My favorite, Marco Rubio.
Of course, Marco Rubio, or Josh Hawley, who's not Catholic, but we'll make him Catholic eventually. But yeah, it's hard for me to kind of celebrate all the kind of the public Catholics, because there's so many pro-abortion Catholics still in Congress. A third of Catholics in the House of Representatives. A third of the House of Representatives is Catholic, and over half of them are pro-abortion. It's just shameful. Every single Democrat Catholic is pro-abortion. But Joe Manchin in the Senate, he's a Catholic. Depending on the day, he's a hero. Some days he's a zero, as we call it. But so there's examples of this. I think the also thing you have to look at is who are some of the prominent Catholics in public life apart from elected office. Archbishop Cordileone, I think, really broke new ground, and as a member of the bishops, of holding Nancy Pelosi accountable. He said, to heck with it. I've had enough. She's been flaunting it for too long and causing too much scandal. And he finally acted. And then, of course, group leaders, yourself, so many different people, the March for Life and Susan B. Anthony, Marjorie, kind of the secret of the pro-life movement is there's so many Catholics everywhere involved in this. And so
You'll tell them our secret, Brian.
What's that?
You'll tell our secrets. Shh.
That's true. We all just pick up the bat phone from Rome and they tell us what to do every morning, but we won't tell everybody.
Oh gosh. That will be the line that's quoted from this podcast. I'm just going to say that right now. I'm calling it. No, it is. I think it is inspiring, because there are many good, Catholic leaders who are firmly, actually living out their faith, proud to live out the teachings of the church, despite all of these bad folks. But I do think it is what that stat you just shared about how many in Congress are Catholic and they're all pro-abortion if they're a Democrat. I mean, that to me tells me we have a teaching problem within the church. And I think it's why it's so important, like what we do at Students for Life when, I was just thinking where you're at in Chicago, trying the partnership of getting into Catholic schools. And we'll have folks who'll say, we don't need a Students for Life group. We don't need a pro-life group. We're a Catholic school. And I'm like, oh boy, yes, you do. In fact, you may need it more than the secular school, because these kids need to hear the truth about abortion before this bad theology or wherever it comes from seeps in.
That's right. I mean, there's no question we have to get to the young people. And I know that's where your organization is primarily focused, and it's upstream of the problem, which is exactly what we need. But, this election, if you think about it, you're talking about, Catholics and leaders. You have in Arizona, pro-life Catholic versus pro-abortion Catholic running for the Senate. In Ohio, you have J.D. Vance, pro-life Catholic against a pro-abortion Catholic. In Nevada, which I think, by the way, I'll make a prediction here. I think we're going to win Nevada. We have a pro-life Catholic and Adam Laxalt running against one of the most radical pro-abortion Catholics in Senator Cortez. And so, a couple of these seats swing the way that we hope they are, and we're working on that. Then you're going to have a whole new gang of pro-life Catholics in the Senate to start tipping that stat better in our direction. And I think, again, to this kind of Catholic solidarity thesis, helping to situate the pro-life issue in this larger context of caring for the needy, the most vulnerable, for workers, for people who love this country, for families who are looking for leadership from Washington, that they can be prioritized. And obviously a lot of these other issues that families are struggling with. I think there's I'm really hopeful. I mean, there's a lot of fights on the horizon, but I'm really hopeful and seeing a lot of these candidates out there now within striking distance of, hopefully I can talk to you, post November, and we can be celebrating the new opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, just to think too of these mashups that you were talking about, these critical Senate swing states, the politics of that, of seeing a pro-life Catholic advance and win and go to be seated in the Senate versus a pro-abortion Catholic, will actually shape and inform how other Americans view the Catholic Church and to understand the teachings of the church. Because I think it's so damaging when we have these self-proclaimed faithful Catholics getting up on a national stage, Nancy Pelosi time and time again talking about how she's a mother, birthed all these children, but there's no Catholic teaching that says, killing a baby in the womb is wrong. I mean, this is so harmful for our other objective of bringing people home to Rome. Okay, so you mentioned 2024, so a little bit, we talked about DeSantis. What are your kind of predictions as we move on from the midterms? We take a quick deep breath and we go right into 2024. What are your predictions for what you think is going to shape up to be?
Well, my first prediction is we probably won't be given a deep breath. It'll probably start way too soon, and we're going to have to, unfortunately, it used to be in politics, you'd have these deep breath moments. You'd have kind of, okay, we're done with the midterm. Now we can relax and regroup. And now it's just all politics all the time. And so, yeah, I think shortly after the midterms, I think Donald Trump is going to announce for president. I think Ron DeSantis is going to announce for president. I think Ted Cruz, Nikki Haley, Mike Pompeo, Mike Pence. There's probably a few others out there that are going to likely jump in. And you're going to have a pretty feisty primary, especially at the top. I think Donald Trump right now clearly has the advantage. He has a very loyal base, 30% plus. And Ron DeSantis is obviously on his heels, and he's going to have to make the case that his record in Florida and his commitment to the things that Trump voters care about is more sincere, and probably the case that he's better positioned to defeat Biden. I think that's probably the best argument he's going to have, because in many ways he's Trump-like in terms of his taking on big corporations and the transgender movement and a lot of the issues that he's been heralded on. And I think the pro-life movement needs to be careful a little bit, though, because we're going to be lured into kind of picking a winner picking a horse real early. And my position is, we should play hard to get. We should be, attractive, kid that everyone wants to date. Again, like I said earlier, they need us more than we need them. And we should be demanding, which is what, frankly, we did with Donald Trump in 2016. That's when a lot of us, including me, had doubts. We said, okay, prove to us that you're serious. We forced him to put forward the actual names of judges that he would put on the Supreme Court. And lo and behold, he followed through, which is exactly why we supported him in 2020. But it was that posture of being demanding and forcing any political candidate, doesn't matter what party or what race, to prove their mettle and to come to us and to win us over, rather than kind of there's a bad term I could use, but giving it up on the first date,
which you should never do. We're going to practice chastity in our relationship for primary picking. How about that? Let's keep it that way. I think
I like this
I think
metaphor, but it could get out of hand quickly.
it could. It is explicitly pro-life. I'm allowed to delve a little bit into that, but I think that's really great advice because it was right. Like I wrote openly, why we can't support Donald Trump in the primaries, and then then I changed my position. I wrote an op-ed, and I said, when it came down to it, Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump, the choice was crystal clear. And I think we did a great service to the movement in forcing Donald Trump to have to come to us and have to woo us and take us out on many dates and make a formal proposal. And I think that was really important. And I certainly am looking forward to maybe helping Governor DeSantis get Florida back on track. I mean, we've been publishing a lot of maps at Students for Life and other pro-life organizations of all these states that have now moved to 15 plus states that have moved to mostly make abortion unavailable. And Florida, I get like a lot of comments when we publish these maps, Brian, because people are like, you're wrong. Florida, why isn't Florida colored in? And I'm like, well, have you looked at Florida's abortion laws? Florida has some of the worst abortion laws. They do. And that's not DeSantis' fault. They've had, a terrible state Supreme Court. They couldn't pass. I mean, there's a lot of things, but there's a lot Governor DeSantis could do. So I think we should definitely hold out until make sure that Governor DeSantis helps us. And I'm really looking forward to being in Tallahassee with hordes and dozens of Students for Life leaders when the state legislative session begins in the new year, because I think this is an important moment for us where we can add more states to the map and see tens of thousands of lives saved. So thank you, Brian, for coming on today and sharing your thoughts about can you be Catholic and pro-abortion? The answer is not in good standing, Catholic. No. And thanks for giving us, let me put you on the hot seat a little bit there about the election, the midterms in 2024. I know it's something we're all sadly going to be talking about very soon. No deep breaths, I guess, for us. This is why I just stopped watching TV. So thank you. Thanks for so much. And thank you for all the excellent work that Catholic Vote does. I love getting the loop, getting the daily news from you all, seeing your Instagram videos and reels. You guys keep me up to speed a lot of times. Where can folks go? What's the best way for everyone to kind of stay in touch with what CatholicVote.org is doing?
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a great conversation and certainly big fans of your work as well. We're so proud to be in the trenches with you and hope to see you together at the victory line. If people want to learn more about Catholic Vote, you can check us out at CatholicVote.org and be sure to sign up for the Loop. Kristan Hawkins is a Loop reader, which is our morning free newsletter that summarizes all things Catholic, all things political, and all things spiritual, and all things good each morning. That's the Loop at CatholicVote.org.
Thanks, Brian. And thank you all for tuning in today to this informative conversation. Even if you're not Catholic, I hope you walked away with some good factoids that you can use and some marching orders for how, regardless of whether the political leader is Democrat, Republican, how we need to hold them accountable to protecting human life across the board, across America. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you share this episode.